Hi, I'm here with Carrie Brassley from Unseen UK, a charity that's working towards ending slavery and human trafficking. Carrie and I have been talking to businesses recently about transparency in supply chains, particularly around the Modern Slavery Act, which requires businesses to publish their transparency in supply chain statement on their website. That statement has to set out in that financial year what the business has done to eliminate or reduce slavery and human trafficking in their supply chains and in their operations. Now, this is part of a broader trend towards greater business transparency. We're seeing the UK government requiring businesses to publish all sorts of information which would usually be kept private. You can find out more about business transparency on the Osborne Clarke website. So with that in mind, Carrie, perhaps we should start with why is transparency in supply chains so important?
So I think the real thing to remember is that when we talk about modern slavery reporting is that we're talking about individuals, people who have been vulnerable and therefore exploited by traffickers, people who may have been forced into a situation against their will. And we have to be careful, we're not talking about just sort of general labour exploitation, we're talking about forced labour. So modern slavery is where someone is unable to leave their exploitative situation. And so when we think about it like that, because businesses have a role to play in this. So when we first started working with survivors, we set up safe houses for men, women, children, and then we realised that actually without working with businesses and governments, this was never going to end, and we were just putting, a plaster on it. And so we, when the modern slavery statement was being drafted, really put pressure on to say, if you include businesses in this, this will make a massive difference. About 51% of modern slavery victims last year were in forced labour, and a lot of those people will be in legitimate businesses. And I think it's very easy to think that it's happening in other parts of the world, it doesn't affect us here, but actually the UK is a big destination. And so we need to look at the modern slavery risks around the world, but also look on our own doorstep.
So some businesses might think that they haven't got a problem, so what is your advice to legitimate businesses?
I would say that no business is without risk. Every single business will have some area in their operations or in their supply chain that is at risk. And that is because the way in which businesses work now has become so global and so integrated that we lose sight of where products and services are coming from. We often hear in the press about nail bars and about hand car washes as being particular areas that are sort of hotspots for this, but we don't also then think about legitimate businesses such as, take a law firm, where you have a lot of people who are highly educated and probably less vulnerable to this. It's probably in the supply chain rather than the operations that the risk then comes in. So thinking about who is building the offices, who is cleaning the offices, who works within the catering sort of facilities, and thinking about hotels that people might stay in when they go on business trips. So when we start to look at the bigger picture, we can see how this may infiltrate legitimate businesses.
And that need to engage businesses is what led to the Modern Slavery Act, which I know that Unseen was instrumental in bringing about. Many businesses want to do their bit, so what can Unseen do to help?
So we work with businesses to look at where their risks are likely to be. One of the businesses we worked with was a large recruitment agency who said, we know that we might have a risk, but we don't really know where to start looking. We suggested that they looked at their database and they ran a report for duplicates, and they discovered that 20 people were living at the same address and 12 people had the same bank details. That meant that there was a real indicator that those people might be being controlled by a trafficker. And so we look at every business on an individual level and sort of say, right, okay, so this is where the risk might be. But we've also are in the process of developing apps that will make this kind of reporting a lot easier. So we understand that people are very busy and have lots of other sorts of transparency reporting that they're responsible for. So we want to go how can we make reporting easy, but then how do we make it more than just compliance? And so we are developing certain applications and software where people will be able to upload their existing policies, their statements. They can look at how many staff have been trained. They can start recording their suppliers on there, and then that will give them an indication of where their gaps are and what actions they need to take to be able to improve and show continuous improvement over years as well. Another thing that we offer is training, because the more people in a business that understand what the risks are and how to spot the signs and how to report it, the greater the whole business culture will be at knowing how to reduce these risks. So we offer face-to-face training sessions, and we offer e-learning, and that means that everyone in the organisation can then become far more knowledgeable about this, and makes it much easier to tackle when you have those people looking out for these particular things. But yeah, it's really the difference between it not being a tick box exercise and people sort of engaging with this, so that we can really actually start to see a difference in reducing the amount of forced labour that is in our supply chain.
Thanks, Carrie. And so just to finish up then, what would you say would be the top action points or top priorities for a business?
Sure. So one of the biggest things that people can do is register with TISC report. That's TISC, and that is a way that you can demonstrate that you have put your modern slavery statement on there. You can also become a partner of TISC report, and you can even map out your supply chain there. We are in the process of developing something that will be available in 2019 called Back to Source, which again is where we'll be able to help map out people's supply chain and really look at how people are actually tackling this. We will never be able to say a product is slavery free or a service is slavery free, but what we can do is where businesses are demonstrating they're doing everything possible to reduce that risk, we will then say, yes, we trust that this business is doing that. And then the other thing is get people trained. That's the most important one, is if you've got everyone knowledgeable about the sector, knowledgeable about the issues, then that can make a real difference.
Thanks. So there's some really practical things that businesses can be doing.